Okay, for our final speaker, we are privileged to have Mr. Gurmit Singh, KS. Now, I have to admit that I was browsing at Gerak Budaya a few months ago and I was very inspired by this photograph. As you can see, it's a photograph of Mr. Gurmit Singh on World Environment Day, 1979. You can work out how many years that was, yeah? And we are, this week actually, on the 5th of June, we are celebrating World Environment Day. So Mr. Gurmit has been at it for a long time. When people like me were not even paying attention. I have to admit, I was probably one of the detractors as well. And now climate change is happening all around us. And the good thing is that legislation is coming even from abroad. So companies are waking up and there's a call for action. So just a quick introduction about Mr. Gurmit. He has been passionate about the environment and sustainability since the 1970s. He continues his primary concern about man's future in view of climate change. He is also co-founder and former chairman of the Center for Environment, Technology and Development Malaysia, CETDEM, and also co-founder and former president of the Environmental Protection Society Malaysia, EPSM. So over to you, Mr. Gurmit. Let me just put on your slide.
You don't mind, I'll sit down and speak because I can control the thing rather than asking him. And also it's better for my legs. I'm getting a bit old. Well, I decided to address this issue in terms of environmental issues, how I have seen them changing during the time I've undertaken this environmental journey. It began with my founding as the president of EPSM in 1974 in University of Malaya. And the first decade of advocacy was a major struggle between apathy and hostility. First decade was basically apathy and hostility from all sectors, including the public. It has also involved editors of mass media who blew hot and cold. One time I would be in the newspapers, then I'd be blacked out and say, hey, what's happened? I say, you go and ask the editors. Then I founded CETDEM in 1985 as an alternate to EPSM so that we could provide tangible solutions rather than just mere criticism. In EPSM, we were accused of being just criticizing, no solutions. In the case of CETDEM, we decided to provide some solution. But of course, as an NGO, you could do only that much. One of the major causes of environmental problems is basically a lack of a maintenance in the country throughout. That results in a lot of pollution problem and patchy enforcement. This has been still going on. The EPSM contribution, which led, for example, in 1975, we did a study of the Klang River just because the official study was under the OSA and the government refused to release it. Despite us doing the study, the results, the government never released theirs. And ours was in the public domain for about the next 10 years before any academic did a study. In 1977, we did an assessment of land mismanagement in the Klang Valley. At that time, we already estimated we were losing 1 million tons of soil every year. And that has not really abated with all the housing development. In 1979, we studied the problem of solid waste by physically following the rubbish dump people and collecting samples of the rubbish dump in PJ itself. And then the same year we did a walkthrough by one individual for the whole of PJ to see what the condition of PJ physically was. In 83, we had a group Enviro walk where whole groups took part on the Enviro walks in PJ. But we found basically there was resistance against participatory planning. And action was a major problem during the 20 years I headed EPSM. Now, this is the way where development has gone in this country. In Himalayas, they leave the hills, but in Malaysia, the hills are all cut to fill up things because engineers find it easier, cheaper to cut and fill rather than to build along slopes. So you see all examples everywhere. Most of the buildings that are built on highland are built that way. So this obviously leads to siltation and erosion. And it's not surprisingly, flash floods have been very, very frequent and they keep on increasing. Now, in terms of CETDEM's work, the first project we actually started was organic farming. No, CETDEM actually did organic farming, but one of the projects the organic farming project did was it trained 50 householders how to do bin composting. Then the organic farming also ran a kitchen gardening and composting classes in community centers. And organic days have been held in SS2, Bandar Utama and Arad Dabatsara. And then we did energy audits of 50 households for the first time in PJ. And that was the first time we determined the average middle class on the whole. Most of the energy was being used by transport, not in the household. 70% of the energy was used. And then we we have been doing annual climate changes since 1970 for the last 10 years. And then it's interestingly, we did another project to show how you could demonstrate a double-story house, intermediate double-story house in PJ into energy efficient. And we will show you later on how this project went. The CETDEM farming project first started in September in 1986 in Subang New Village. It was relocated to Kampung Paya Jaras Dalam in February 87. The farm actually stopped short that we could actually grow organic vegetables, but we stopped it after 96 because we could not find enough people, and the lady in charge felt that she needed to work with farmers rather than just have the farm alone. So we had demonstrated the viability, but we actually wanted to promote it, and therefore it switched to promotional activities from its base in PJ. This is an example of the sort of classes that she still runs in our community center in section 19. Then the demo house, this we could only undertake. I tried to find money from Malaysia, but couldn't get. And finally had to get from the Danes through a project where we retrofitted a two-story, 33-year-old intermediate terrace house to show it to be cool and energy efficient. The end result has been a reduction of electricity consumption by 33% and internal temperatures 3 degrees cooler than the shaded porch temperature without any aircon. And we are still occupying and using that house. This is more than 10 years ago. And this was the opening of the house by the then Minister of Energy, Lim Keng Ye, officiated through the solar lantern. And this is what the house managed to achieve before and after. So the indoor temperature downstairs will manage to get between 27 and 30 degrees centigrade. Energy efficiency. This case study, as I said, we did for 50 householders. And we use this to make sure that, to tell people how they could first determine the energy baseline. Secondly, know how to use the electricity consumption and fuel. And through things like zero cost action and action incurring some cost. Like, for example, air conditioning. Don't have your air conditioning set for 15 degrees, as many people do. Increase it to 23, 24 degrees. Switch on the aircon when you need it. You don't have the aircon running all the time when you're not even there. So on and so forth. But action was taken by many people on the aircon part, but on the transport, very few. Out of the 50 people, only about 3 people took action. One person decided to walk instead of driving his car to work. The other person decided to switch to a motorbike instead of the car. And the third person actually decided to use a bit more public transport. But transport was the most difficult thing and remains the most difficult thing. And this is how the breakdown of energy is. That you find that 70% of the energy was used on fuel by cars, because many people only count energy people use to travel to work. What about you take your children to school? Your marketing, all that is forgotten. And all that energy, 70% of the total energy is actually is fuel, and only about 30%, about 20% is actually electricity, and gas and thermal is only about 5%. And even in the electricity, majority of the bulk of the electricity used in air conditioning and refrigerators, and some in water heating. But lights, very little. So the bulk of the aircon is households, middle class, is refrigerators and aircon. Mainly aircon actually. Refrigerators only in a few places. Now, this is how we dispose waste. Solid toxic waste, even up to today, you can find in palm oil estates and all that. People throw elephant waste and all that sort of thing. We throw toxic waste, solid waste, hazardous waste. The other alternative we throw into rivers. Come and visit our rivers. All the waste being dumped into rivers. In the third decade, we told you, as I mentioned, we did the energy consumption. We did Hari Organic in Klang Valley and Penang. We set up a think tank in 2012 called SUDI. This has done a number of studies because an independent think tank on energy, but our problem has been getting money to fund the studies. Then we did a fit and safe problem public awareness program with support from CETDEM. Then the publication of the first report of SUDI, publication of the second study on elusive urban sustainability. This was interesting. We tried to compare towns that claim to be sustainable. Penang, Georgetown, PJ, and we wanted to do Kuantan, but we couldn't get a person to go to Kuantan. And Malacca. Malacca, totally no reply. The person went on holiday, nobody bothered to reply. Letter after letter. After I finished the study, then I got a letter saying, oh, we can supply you some information. I said, sorry, the study is already complete. And in the case of Georgetown, it's funny, the municipal council is structured to be Penang Island, not just Georgetown. So when I went and asked the city planner, I said, can you give me the data just for Georgetown? Sorry, no data. Only data is for Penang Island. I said, I'm not interested in Penang Island. I want just data for Georgetown. So the only place that had data for the city was PJ. But even for PJ, they did not have any specific person assigned to cover environment and sustainability. So one of the recommendations we made in this study was for you to set up sustainability officers who would be responsible to the mayor. And then we did the eco-mobility study. That was quite interesting because the concept between, just now somebody talked about transport, the concept between accessibility and transport is very misleading. What we need, the whole purpose of transport is accessibility. We need accessibility to goods and resources. And accessibility can be done without necessarily doing transport. For example, you with your new wireless system, you can work from the house. You don't have to travel to the office. Similarly, you can transfer goods now, having using gig workers, just ordering through them and go to them. You don't have to transport yourself. So you don't necessarily have to transport. And then even if you do transport with the minimum. So the idea is to develop cities so that goods and services do not require that far transport within 5 kilometers. So you can just move, walk, cycle, carry the stuff there. You don't have to need a car. Basically, I think our problem has been we have too many cars in Malaysia. These are some visuals of events that I spoke at internationally that I attended. Then I continued in 1991 international climate work. I started this in 91, attended international meetings, attended the Rio Summit. The Rio Summit was not a COP. Sorry, somebody just now mentioned it is a COP. It was not a COP. It was not. Conference of parties, it's only of hell term is used for meetings of meetings of conventions, biodiversity convention, climate convention. Then you have a conference of party. There was no conference for the party for Rio. I stepped down as EPSM president in 1994. Then I've been active in international groups like CAN, SPENA, Infose, IFORM. Attended the World Solar Summit in 96. It's very interesting because Mahathir was also there and was elected the vice chairman. And it's interesting to note the then Minister of Energy, what he said before Mahathir got elected and what he said after Mahathir was elected as far as renewable energy is concerned. We came out with the report on renewable energy just before the meeting in Harare, and he dismissed it. Publicly, he said there's no future for solar energy, renewable energy in Malaysia. We were saying there's potential here. Then, after Mahathir got elected as vice president of the World Solar Summit in Harare, he came back and said, there is potential. So, everything was decided by what Mahathir did and said, and you know that we are paying the price of that. I was appointed to the EQC in 1986. The second decade, the government recognized me through the giving of the Langkawi Award. Now, these are some environmental losses that we encountered. Under Rompin, many of you have heard. How about logging being led by the Sultan of Pahang occurred when this was mid-70s. Asian rare earth, radioactive waste, funding, the factory ran, closed, opened again. It was a nightmare. Mammoth copper mine, another big problem. In Sabah, the holes are still there, the toxic waste is still there. Batu caves, this was where I ran into a problem with one of my members because he was a Muslim and he felt the society should not get involved in defending Batu caves because we were defending idols. And we said, no, we were not defending idols. We were defending against air pollution because of the quarrying that was going on. We were not defending. Right, okay. So on, so Felda schemes, Klang River pollution, all the time, the Klang River, even up to today. You saw photographs, CCM, land degradation, and so on. So I will not go into all those details. Positive, formation of DOE, cancelling of the Tembeling Dam, and Penang Hill development. Now they want to revive the Penang Hill cable car, a different route. So Penang state governments are crazy. Formation of environmental groups like EPSM, reduction of palm oil waste, toehold by organic farming. What are the hurdles? Hostile environment, little support, uneven media commerce, limited democratic space, public apathy, dearth of volunteers. Very difficult to get volunteers for environmental groups. You can get works for green groups, but groups for brown issues that EPSM and CETDEM was extremely difficult. Denial of undergrad support because of the University and University Colleges Act. So the moment we registered EPSM, the act was already approved and we couldn't get students. We had to apply to the Vice Chancellor to give permission to the student just to join the environmental society. And as a result, during all its history, it got only, I think, 5 students. So they were supposed to be the shock troops, the people who do the work, leg work for EPSM, totally written off. We had to rely on full-time people. That is why you found few people who in the shadow of Operation Alang, the EPSM vice president was the first person to be arrested. A lot of you don't know that. And he was for 2 years, and then he was sent on a government scholarship to do his PhD in chemical engineering. He came back, he left the society, he didn't join the society. Outspokenness, shun, unwillingness to address root causes. Little wins, EIA Institute, some pollutants have been reduced, NGOs appointed, RE accepted as a fifth fuel, but not very much emphasis. 3R accepted in solid waste management. It's almost my last few slides. Collaboration with other NGOs is done through groups like KENSI, Infose, SPANA, MCCG. We're active. A lot of people do not know that the Friends of Information Act is not a new idea. It was way back in 1980. We spoke about it when we were campaigning against the OSA. But it was then forgotten and only recently picked up. And recently worked with the Malaysian NGOs for improved public transport as well as COs. Malaysian transport, I may want to touch a bit on this. The latest figures show that the transport sector is the second dominant emitter for fuel combustion. But there seems to be relevant stakeholders to effectively reduce these emissions. This is a comparison of transport emissions. And you notice this is although old, but relatively we are not good. You look at KL emissions are not far per capita compared with European emissions. And if you look at the second diagram, that is why rail, for example, while going up to Penang, say, I now try to go by train rather than driving even, because you look at the emissions, the passenger and the thing are far more efficient to tow by train than by car. And of course, plane, definitely not. That's why even now in the climate convention, scientists are campaigning people not to use planes as far as possible. Try to travel, for example, France has come up with this new regulation to use less than 500 kilometers. You must use the terminal train system rather than flying. Here, every state wants to have a train, airport. Mitigation efforts, very minimal. LRTs and rapid KL in Klang Valley, but the increase is rest of the country is neglected. You do a lot of things in Klang Valley, and as somebody mentioned just now, they are all in the mega project range. I was laughing to myself. Over the period of my involvement, I see projects which are in the millions, now no more in the millions. People are talking the billions. Nobody talks of millions anymore. Billions. That's how, and you know what it means in terms of corruption. Then the whole issue of seamless integrated transport. Today, biodiversity loss, greenhouse gas emission. Journey is almost coming to an end. 4 decades. I stepped down finally as chairman of the board on 18th of December last year, and I'm changed. 5 minutes left. This is my last slide, in fact. Climate change definitely is a real issue. More government and NGO attention, but not enough in this country and in the world, of course, very bad. Logging and deforestation, more NGO interest, but people tend to pick things on forest when there are other causes, really, not really forest, when it's land erosion, land mismanagement, not just forest itself. Forest is only a small part of the land mismanagement issue. And then plastic waste, of course, this has taken a high profile. There's talk of plastic treaty, zero waste. It's good to see groups going up, food waste, drawing attention. But food waste does not take into account people wasting actual food itself. Not just that's at the end, but food being wasted. I don't know how many people actually, I always get into the problem with my wife. She keeps on quarreling with me on every grain of rice that I forget to wipe off the plate. She's to that particular she goes. So it's level to what you want to be. But I think the whole issue is basically root cause for many environmental problems, greed, not need. We have transmitted our greed into our need. We make it look as our need. Thank you very much. Oh, yeah, that's it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gurmit. If I recall correctly, the last quote was by Gandhi, right? Something along those lines. There's enough for the world's needs, but not the world's greed. Yeah. So we're going to take another short break before we convene all four speakers for the Q&A. So don't go away. We'll come back in about 5 minutes, yeah, and we'll have all of them, and you can shoot your questions to all four of them. Thank you.